Good morning, everyone. When we live our lives in the realm of the karmic self, we often find ourselves pushed and pulled, pushed and pulled by longing and sometimes by aversion. There's an endless turning of I want, I don't want. And in that push and pull, we try to find a way forward. But when every movement of the heart leans towards either desire or resistance, how do we know what direction is true? This isn't a new question. There's a koan all about it. You probably figured that out by now, right? It appears in the Book of Equanimity, or the Shoyo Roku, and it's the 100th case, the capstone. It's called Rōya's Mountains and Rivers. A monk asked, if the original state is clean and pure, then why do rivers, mountains, and the great earth arise? Master Rōya replied, if the original state is clean and pure, how does it suddenly produce rivers, mountain, and earth? Subtle indeed, yeah? He asks a question and replies apparently with a question that almost looks as if it's the same question. When we ease into koans, we need to recognize that they're conceptual pointers, that are trying to point beyond the realm of the conceptual understanding. So if we at least know where they're trying to shift our gaze or attention to, or if we have some inkling of that, then we can begin to feel into the case. In a single turn, the whole question dissolves. The monk is seeking purity beyond his idea of the world. And Rōya, he's showing purity as the very essence of our lived experience itself, as the world itself, as an openness and a wonder and a curiosity. When we're in that place, then original nature, self-nature, aren't two. When I read this, I was starting to think about a voice from a different time and place. Some of you know who Aleister Crowley is. He was a British occultist, and he wrote a book called The Book of the Law. You'd say, well, where is he going with this? This is not common fodder for Zenzog, right? And he recorded what he claimed to be a divine revelation that he had in Cairo. And in it, the famous dictum came forward. Do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law, or shall be the whole of the law. So Crowley's law of Telema was meant, in his words, to reveal the true will, the deepest current of one's being in harmony with the cosmos. But as it enters human ears and our karmically constructed self, it has a tendency to become a license for self-gratification, for personal supremacy, for the enthronement of the isolated self or the constructed self. In a way, this is self-nature mistaking itself for original nature. It's the mountain proclaiming, I made myself. It's the small I mistaking its own preferences for some sort of cosmic necessity. When we live from that place, we call our cravings, or the satisfaction of our cravings, freedom. We confuse compulsion with authenticity. We build altars to our own appetites, and we call it spiritual. So if we strip Crowley's law of its nuance, it's really the pinnacle of the egoic self, the self echoing its own voice until it believes that it hears the universe, until it believes in itself. And that's what happens when self-nature severs itself from its own ground, when form forgets the source that gives it life. And I think of another voice that often echoes sometimes. Some of you know that I had training originally as a Christian minister many, many years ago, and I don't claim to be that. I certainly don't hold ordination in any denomination. But I can remember John the Baptist in the Gospel of John, 3rd chapter, saying, all of his disciples come to him, Jesus' disciples, I'm sorry, all of John's disciples come to him, saying that Jesus is now baptizing more people than he is. And John replies, a person can receive only what's given them from heaven. I am not the Messiah. I am the friend of the bridegroom. The joy of the friend is made complete when he hears the bridegroom's voice. And then he says a simple and profound statement. He must increase. I must decrease. So he's kind of, again, motioning to this gesture towards original nature, not as denial, not as shame, but as some realization, embodiment. John, in this sense, is not truly being erased. Yeah? He's realizing the source that animates him. And by doing that, he's able to become outside aware of the construct he calls John. He understands that the light shining through him was never his own to begin with, certainly not from the perspective of the creative or constructed self. In that one sentence, the small self is yielding to the great. You could see it as the river returning to the sea. Yeah? But even in that analogy, there can be some danger. We can mistake some sort of disappearance or denial of self for holiness, yeah? Or some vast emptiness as truth, but a more nihilistic one in which we've kind of cleared the field, pushed everything outside of the realm of conscious awareness. So we have this little spotlight where everything looks clean and pure. But of course, it's all there. We just have chosen not to see it. Yeah. If we cling to self-negation as tightly as we once clung to the self, we're in the same conundrum that we began with. Both in their own way are forms of pride. Yeah? One's really loud and one's kind of a humble brag. Yeah? But ultimately, Rōya's answer cuts through both extremes. He's not siding with Crowley's self-proclamation or with John's self-erasure. He's pointing directly to the place before either impulse arises. Yeah. That's the critical thing. That's where wisdom resides. The original nature, which is clear, pure, and unbounded, is not somewhere else. It's not untouched by the world. Yeah? It's the very life that we live as it manifests itself. Mountains, rivers, thoughts, breath unfolding as itself before any notion of mountains, rivers, thoughts, and breath. I know that sounds like a very subtle distinction, but it's profound. There's a wide dichotomy between the two. If I say it's a mountain, if I know it as a mountain, I've lost touch with it. The state of wonder that connects us has been broken. If you come into this place and act from this realization, then all of these conceptual ideations become transparent. It's not that they disappear, it's that we can see through them. We can recognize that when we breathe, the very universe is breathing. And when we act, it's the Dharma itself acting. I think this is what Crowley was reaching for when he spoke of true will. But I think what obscured it was the I really never let go of the center. Yeah. And I also think it, to a certain extent, it's what John embodied when he stepped aside so that greater light could move through him. But what Rōya is trying to say is these aren't two directions. They're one turning. The pure state suddenly producing mountains and rivers. We live in this turning every day. Each moment an I is created or conjured, and then we're pulled between the I must assert and I must surrender. Tug of war that comes from our conceptual grasping, from our desperate need to know and to label. Zen doesn't choose a side. It just reveals the ground before choice. And when self-nature returns to its source, it doesn't vanish. It becomes a pure expression of that source. When form forgets itself, then it bursts forth. When mountains forget mountains, then mountains appear. So the way as mountains and rivers aren't metaphors for duality, they're the living body of the undivided. So when you find yourself torn between the I will and the I will not, remember Rōya's clarion call. If the original state is clear and pure, how does it suddenly produce mountains and rivers? Something we need to constantly sit with, because that puts you in that state of wonder, that place of not knowing, that place where this very breath, this very body, this very voice is the pure state expressing itself. Nothing needs to be improved or erased. And when we practice in this way, the imperative of this very moment comes forward. And then we can truly step into our life and be actualized by what arises, rather than shadow boxing with the demons of our small self. We can actually show up. We manifest as compassion. We can actually engage with our life in a way that heals, uplifts, and mends, rather than splits apart.